How much has the digital revolution changed the publishing industry? Welcome, mere mortalites, to another round of the book reviews. You've got Kyron here on the 25th of the 1st, 2024, the day before Australia Day, live at 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, not only on YouTube, but also on the podcasting apps themselves. So if you do ever want to join in live, you've got a couple of different options. Obviously, you can go to the YouTube link, but you can also jump in onto a modern podcasting app like Fountain, Podverse, Podcast Guru, True Fans, and be able to get this live experience, which I'm very happy about. We've got this rocking and rolling again. So that is 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on a Thursday. So that is just Wednesday midnight UTC 0. So whatever your time zone is, plus or minus it from that, and you'll be able to join in. Beautiful. All right. That is out of the way. This is the book review channel where I dive deeper into the books I'm reading, give you juicy information within, extract some themes that you might not have thought about, really try and give you an overall impression of the book so you can decide if it is worth your time to spend on it. I typically focus on older books, classics you might call them. I've got a couple in front of me, which I will be reviewing shortly, notably some John Steinbeck. I really do like going back to him. But every now and then I dive into a book which is a bit old, a bit newer, I should say, because it has a special reason. There's a special reason for that. And I do indeed have for you today Book Wars by John B. Thompson, The Digital Revolution in Publishing. So this book was published in 2021, and if you can't see on this video, it is a thick boy, thick with 2 C's, maybe even 3. 500 dense pages, and when I hold it up, I mean dense. There's no paragraph breaks in this baby. It is just, it's just thick. It is a thick book, and it probably took me about 15 hours of reading to get through in total. I have been reading this book for about a month and a half, maybe, just trying to chip away at it because holy damn, there was a lot to get through. So let's jump into it itself. What was my motivation and initial impression while coming into this? Well, I'm trying to think of how I actually came across it in the library. So I got this book from the library. I think it's because I was searching for other technological related books, something like The Internet of Money, perhaps by Andreas Antonopoulos, or something related to Chris Anderson's Free, perhaps. But I came across this and I just saw the title. The title's kind of interesting, and then it just spoke to me of like, oh man, this is going to be the exact material that I need for the Value for Value show. So whipped it up, booked it out for 2 months, and was like, I'm going to get through this. I know it's thick, but it's probably worth it. So it got into it pretty quickly. My initial impression of the book was relatively good. So the introduction doesn't last too long, and then it just gets into the meat of it, showing some graphs and things. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is interesting. And it was good because it surprised me in that the ebook didn't change things as much as I thought it would. I thought the publishing industry would have changed a lot, but actually it was it changed, but not in the ways that I would have expected. So this gets us, I guess, onto the plot and the style of this book. So it's largely dictated by category rather than a linear timeline. So it says, digital revolution in publishing, but it's essentially a historical book, I would say, largely focusing on the period of 2005 to 2018. So there's 12 main chapters in this book. I'll try and read them out. So we had the preface and introduction, but also things like the faltering rise of the ebook, the blacklist wars, Google trouble, struggles for visibility, crowdfunding books, book flicks, the new orality, old media, new media. That's not all of them, but you get a sense of the type of things that he's talking about there. So he's talking about categories rather than a linear timeline because so many different things were happening at the same time. It would be very confusing to try and jump from one and to the other and saying like, this was happening. Oh, but also this was happening and this was going on over here. So very, very much a category-based book. It really gives you a feel of what was happening. I think that's the main thing I can take from the plot of it, which was he's really trying to go exhaustively into all of these different things. So he sticks pretty well to the core thesis, which I was happy with, especially after reading Manufacturing Consent, and was like, this is not what you promised in the subtitle nor on the back pages. and which was his core thesis of how digital has changed things. He maybe gets slightly too sidetracked with the business models and with monetary considerations because he lists off a lot of companies in it. But, it's still in that core theme of, what do publishers do? Well, they publish books. Why do they do that? Well, it could be because they want to help authors, because they love books in the world, or it could be because they want money. So, money is a pretty important consideration. In terms of the style of it, a lot of research and interviews with companies and important individuals forms the core thesis of it. He does have some quotes, some data, footnotes, figures, subchapters. There's a lot of different things that you can find within it. But I would say that the bulk of it is writing about the experience of people and how things have changed from, yes, a monetary view of things, but also just like the linkages between people of agents and then book publishers and then the typesetters and things like that. So you do get different aspects within here. I mentioned it was dense before, and this is partly due to repetition that I think feels somewhat unnecessary. So we're going to go to our first quote here from Cole, who is my voice actor for this, and he is going to read from page 286.
The emergence of large crowdfunding organizations that have come to play a significant role in the creative industries, especially Indiegogo and Kickstarter. These crowdfunding organizations are not specifically focused on books. They do fund book projects, but this is a small part of what they do. Moreover, they are pure crowdfunding organizations in the sense that they are just about raising money. A platform for raising capital from the crowd. They don't actually publish your book once the capital is raised. You have to make separate arrangements for that, whether this is with a traditional publisher or by self-publishing. So crowdfunding is not in and by itself a form of publishing or self-publishing. It is a form of fundraising tout court. Crowdfunding organizations like Indiegogo and Kickstarter can help you raise money to write and publish a book, but they won't publish the book for you. It is your responsibility to arrange the publication as best you can. Yeah,
so that's really cool. It got into, he gets into all these companies and things like that. But then that whole passage there, I think you could probably condense that down into 3 sentences maybe. But because he's like, there's Indiegogo and Kickstarter and they're crowdfunding, but they do it not just for books, but then, we'll just reiterate that it's not just for books and that you have to go publishing yourself. It's very exhaustive. That's like kind of the word I really took out after reading this. I'm like, holy damn, I'm glad that I got through all of this. I'll talk more in the summary about why that it is and whether it was worth it, but it was an exhausting book to get through. And there's all sorts of other things that he also does where he'll have, a list or a more in particular like a graph or list of numbers. And then he'll go, oh yeah, so in 2017, it was this number. And then this changed by 36% to go down to this number. And it's like, I can see it there, mate. I don't particularly need you to spend 3 pages listing off all the things that I can see in the chart and the data. That's why you have a chart, so you don't have to do that. So there was definitely, in the style-wise, I would say it was too much. This book did not need to be this long. So we'll leave it at that for the moment, and maybe let's jump on to some of the questions and themes that really arose from this. So we'll start off with a question, which was the question in the front. How has the digital revolution changed publishing? And so here I'm going to give you the condensed summary of this book so that you don't have to really get through all of this. Okay, overall, the book industry has not only survived, but I would say has thrived. And this is in comparison to perhaps music, for example, where sales flatlined. And you can see that in the previous graph that I showed, where the revenues of the music industry, they were just going down. They didn't actually do well with the things of like Napster and being able to access music digitally online. People were going and kind of resorting to piracy was what I would say, because the music industry was trying to like be a laggard and say like, no, this is how things are done, and just trying to ignore this new digital revolution. And so that actually wiped a lot of value going from me, the individual, the person consuming music, to the artist ultimately, a lot of that value got wiped out because we had to do things like go onto LimeWire and torrent. The book industry actually noticed this, and their revolution came almost a decade later than the music. And so they actually did well from it. They kind of learnt the lessons of, you can't fight this thing. That's not the way to go. And so you have to adapt to it. And so what we really see is that whilst ebooks were they grew up very rapidly, their sales, and you can kind of see this through the graph from like 2008 through to 2013. There was a big like exponential spike. Oh my God, ebooks, they're going to take over. They're going to absolutely wipe out. People aren't going to buy physical books anymore. They're going to go extinct. Wrong. What ended up happening was the ebooks sales flatlined, and they kind of just stayed at a rough level of, certainly many, many millions, if not billions of dollars. But this actually made more money for the book publishers because books that are online, are digital, are much cheaper to reproduce, I should say. And so their margins actually improved. And you can see this with some of the companies like Simon & Schuster, who shared some of their data with the author, John B. Thompson. And you can see they actually made more money because they were still selling at roughly the same amount, but it just costs way less to produce a physical book. So that was one of the interesting things that came out. What we also saw was that gatekeepers were not eliminated. There's like the big five he constantly refers to in this book, and it's Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster, and then three others, which I can't remember. And they were not eliminated. These huge publishers did not go away, but there was certainly more access for individual smaller authors who perhaps were writing on a subject which would never really be, acceptable. Like maybe it's too much of erotic and it's getting into some like sexual things, or maybe it's too political, or maybe you just don't have access. Maybe you're in a foreign country, you don't have, all these sorts of things. Basically, the digital revolution, and in particular self-publishing through somewhere like, I think it was called KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, really opened up the doors for many people to be able to create books. Once again, sort of like The Long Tail by Chris Anderson, a lot of junk got released, but that's fine. The market will figure it out, and it's better to have access to all of these things, and we can figure it out ourselves, rather than just relying on these gatekeepers at the top. So gatekeepers weren't eliminated. There's still the big five publishing. They still were very meticulous with, the politics, who this author is, are they going to sell, do we trust them, all this sort of thing. That still existed, but it did now result in like many people being able to access and self-publish. Books are more than just Harry Potter as well. When I came into this, I really had in my mind, it's a book, it's the kind of stuff that I read. But books are many, many different things. And what I got from this, they can be, audio books, they can be compilations, they can be photography books, the sort of thing that you'll put on a coffee table, for example. They can be short stories on your phone. They could be medical journals. They could be a list or quotes of things for your friends. And so it's only something which is designed to actually go out to 100 people, and it's not being mass produced for a huge audience. So it's not the Harry Potter. Not every author is trying to be a J.K. Rowling. Many, many, many people are just trying to create a small book that will go out to a select few people. And if it goes out to wider stuff, that's awesome. But even then, sometimes it's not meant for that. So the digital revolution changed a lot of things, but it actually didn't completely revamp the industry. There's still bookstores out there at this very day in Queen Street Mall. Maybe they're not as much. Maybe people discover books in different ways, i.e. through places like Amazon, which is probably the biggest change actually in the digital revolution that happened. They took over a tremendous amount of the market, but the market still has the same actors in. They still have the agents who are searching for books. They still have the book publishers who help with the logistics of typesetting and writing and accessing, verifying sources, claims, all this sort of stuff. All of these things still exist. It's just slightly different. And there was some book wars, I guess. I guess this will get onto the next section, the themes of the book. At times it feels like we're at the whims of technology and inexorably driven towards a particular outcome. And you would have seen this recently in like The Inevitable by Kevin Kelly, where he lists off all of these different things that he thinks are going to happen, and it's kind of just like, we've got no choice. Technology is going to drive us to this thing. What I actually found from this was I don't think that's the case, as page 344 at the bottom explains, and Cole will give us a section and a feel of this right now.
The first and most obvious factor is that the appeal of ebook subscription services will depend on the extent to which readers wish to read books in a digital format on a screen rather than as a physical book. In this respect, subscription services in the book industry are not directly comparable to subscription services in music, films, and TV series, simply because of the physical print-on-paper book remains the preferred format for many readers in a way that has no parallel in the music, film, and TV industries. Today, the vast majority of consumers listen to music in some digital format. Even with the renewed popularity of vinyl, which, despite its remarkable comeback, still accounted for less than 5% of U.S. music industry revenue in 2017. And films and TV series are always watched on a screen. So subscription services in music, films, and TV are tapping into markets where content is typically and overwhelmingly delivered digitally, and in the case of films and TV, consumed on screens. There is simply no other way to consume it. With books, however, print remains the dominant medium, and for those readers who prefer the medium of print, a subscription service for ebooks will have no real attraction. It is in those areas and genres where ebook reading is particularly prevalent, e.g. romance, fantasy, and thriller, that subscription services have gained traction and are likely to flourish in the future. Both because these are genres where the EP ratios are skewed in favor of ebooks and because heavy readers in these genres are likely to appreciate the financial benefits of accessing content through a subscription model.
So once again, we can see the wordiness of this. God damn, this book is wordy, which is good in some cases. But I suppose the main point that was coming out there was these subscription models, these things, like they did not rely on just the digital mechanisms. You know, the digital is important. It changes a lot of things. It means that things can be condensed down into certain different, for the screens, for tablets, for ebooks, for Kindles, things like this. But ultimately, the driver of what will happen is still humans. And so for example, many people thought, okay, ebooks are going to change everything, and it's actually going to become a new format. It's not going to be just a text written on screen. It's going to be this multimedia experience where you open up it, you start reading, and if you're reading about a character walking down the street, you're going to hear the sounds of the street coming out at you from your device. If you double click on a word, which you perhaps might not realize, it'll link open and it'll create these different boxes. They're imagining this total revolutionary new way of consuming content, which would be a completely new format. It's not going to be a book anymore. It's going to be something different. What ended up happening was, no, people did not want that. Digitization did not create a new medium. People just wanted portable books. And so what we saw was all of these experiments with these different things ended up just kind of not being profitable in the end. People just wanted to access a book and read it. And another thing was that, print is still preferred by humans. So it's not like even just having digital books now meant the physical books went away. No, pretty much humans still just, there's something in the tactile feel and being able to have a heaviness and being able to flip back and forth. This was actually very important for me in this, where I did need to go back to certain pages and create different graphs, take pictures and photos and quotes like I do for what Cole just read out there. Doing all of that on an ebook would be a much harder experience for me personally. What else did we find with the subscription services and the different models? Well, that was largely dictated on the people who are reading it. And so Amazon, for example, the subscription really works for really heavy readers And who are really heavy readers? It's people who read thriller, sci-fi, romance, erotica, a bit of fantasy chucked in there as well. And largely, by in the bulk, they didn't say it in the book, but I'm putting that down to female housewives because they can consume ridiculous amounts of content. And if you go onto Bookstagram, you will see it is mostly females posting all of these, like, I've read 326 books this year, down from 426 last year, but I'm really still proud of myself. It's like, Jesus Christ, how are you consuming this much stuff? So ebooks and a subscription model are amazing for people like that. The limited subscription model only works if you get the right business model from the start, and if you get enough people and you get network effects. And so he's got all of these examples in the book of how people were trying to essentially capture a network and capture people onto their particular platform, and then they'd figure out the monetization models afterwards, and they'd do all these different things. It was very squishy, very, very squishy. And what I took from it was so much of it was just luck. You could be a dedicated person really trying to change the industry, and it just needed to be like at the right time, or the right device needed to come out the year before. The Kindle changed a lot of things for sure. The Amazon and Google had this basically like where they were taking over not taking over. Google was digitizing a lot of books because they wanted to improve their search. And this actually had some conflicts with people who were like, hey, that's our IP and you're just digitizing it. And they were creating little snippets that you could read online. I actually remember this when I used to type things in, and some of the first Google search results would be from a book, but it would only show you like a paragraph or maybe a page at most. And publishers were very angry about this, and they were suing Google, and they were doing all these things. In the end, it kind of just went away. It didn't really change that much because Google actually found out like, oh, we don't actually need these books appearing in our search results anymore. There was also a lot of fighting between the book publishers and Amazon about this kind of agency model versus subscription model, because basically Amazon was dictating the prices, and they were saying, every book's going to be $9.99, whereas all the agencies, all the publishers were like, oh my God, no, you can't do that. All of this kind of was just, after reading this and seeing the whole history, I'm just like, okay, it's still dictated by humans. The business models have changed, but it's not this drive of technology that's shaping humans. I actually think in this case, humans shaped the drive of what was happening with books far more than being able to digitize things and things like that. So yeah, very, very interesting in that aspect. Let's jump now onto the author, perhaps some extra details. So John B. Thompson, he is a British professor at the University of Cambridge, studied philosophy, sociology, social anthropology. He's a many-time author. This dude's published quite a few books himself, mostly focused upon like social media, mass communication, ideology, politics, that sort of stuff. He's written two very similar books, one on academic publishing in particular, and he was focusing in the time period, I suppose, from, I think it was like the 1970s onwards, and then also one on overall book publishing called Merchants of Culture. So this was really focused just on the digital, but he's also written books on other specific things related to the publishing industry, and he talks about in his notes at the end on the research methods and saying like, yeah, I drew some of the stuff from that. One thing I gotta give him praise for, this dude was meticulous. Hundreds of interviews, a lot of time spent really trying to focus like what is actually happening, what had happened in the industry, and yeah, kudos to him. He really knew what he was doing, and so this book, although the style of it was very heavy, it's not like unnecessary heavy or distracted heavy. It was like, no, okay, it was heavy for a reason. I guess I would put it that way. The main thing, the extra thing that I got from this was there's just so many counterintuitive behaviors or things that happened that were counter to perhaps what your intuition would have been. And so all of these predictions that people had, they were so wrong. They just were not even close to the reality of what happened. So people were expecting with ebooks, who would be one of the main markets for it? It would be businessmen who would want a financial book that they could read whilst in airports, because these are guys who are like time poor, they're busy. This is like the perfect sort of thing for them. Was that a main driver? No, it wasn't, because businessmen and reading a financial book, like, you need to focus on that. You need time and brain energy and really be able to like flip through it in different ways. Businessmen did not want it. And so what ended up happening was, narrative romance for women was much, much easier to use on an ebook. People don't want that enhanced multimedia book. I talked about that before. And here's a little quote from the book as well. They wanted the experience of a book without the distractions of all that other media, which was just, once again, counterintuitive. People, when they were first thinking like ebooks, they're going to change, we've got to add all these functionalities in. The thing that ended up being the best seller was the Kindle, because it just made things easy. That's what people wanted. They wanted ease. They wanted to be able to have their Kindle, automatically like download books from the device itself using Wi-Fi or not Wi-Fi. They didn't want a backlit screen, and the Kindle provided that, and man, it boomed and really changed a lot of things. Ultimately, it was more efficient, the ebooks and what happens in the industry, but not initially. And this is another thing with technology. You think, oh, digitization, it's going to make things so much easier. We just have to scan the books. We've already got it written down, digitally somewhere. We'll just put that out in a different format. Bam, Dunskies. Not really. So jumping back to page 13, right at the start here, here's some interesting stuff that Cole's going to read out for us.
By the mid-1990s, many of the technical aspects of book production, including typesetting and page design, had been thoroughly transformed by the application of digital technologies. Progress was more erratic in other areas, such as editing and printing. Here to there were aspects of the workflow that became increasingly digital in character, through ways that were more complex than a one-way shift from analog to digital. While many authors were composing texts on computers and henceforth creating digital files, their files were often too full of errors for publishers to use. It was often easier and cheaper for the publisher to print out the text, edit and mark up the printed page, and then send the edited and marked up manuscript to a compositor in Asia who would rekey the text and add the tags for the page layout. So while in principle the author's keystrokes were the point at which the digital workflow could begin, in practice, at least in trade publishing, the digital workflow typically began at a later point, when the edited and marked up manuscript was rekeyed by the compositor who supplied the publisher with a file that included additional functionality.
How stupid is that? So instead of going from, someone writes something digitally and then it just gets printed and then it gets put out in an ebook. No. What ended up happening was someone would write something digitally, it gets printed, so then they could mark it up, and then it could get remade into digital, and then it could be printed again. It's just like, you're holding your hands in your head going like, well, this isn't actually making things more efficient, is it now? And you could also see that with all the different formats that people would have to put it in, Mobi, EPUB, PDF. There was a ridiculous amount of things. There was so much just change as well, where ISBNs, was this connected to this book? Oh, people aren't doing this, and so now we don't know how many books are getting published per year because many self-publishers aren't doing it. So much different stuff was happening. So, what explains all these poor predictions? Why did and how come, even having data from the music industry, for example, why couldn't we predict like, the same thing's going to happen to books? Who could have predicted, for example, another company called Wattpad being really popular with young teens, in particular females again, who want to read fan fiction on their phones, which is it's a huge app. It's got like hundreds of millions of downloads and things like that. All of this, I would just say, is humans are unpredictable. We really do not know exactly what we want, and sometimes the market has to just produce devices, produce things, and then we find out like, oh yeah, I really did want that, and it's for a counterintuitive reason that it's just really, really hard to predict. And so using data from other industries and saying, oh, this really screwed up music, you guys, you're so screwed, like good luck, big five publishers. It didn't actually end up happening that way, because humans respond differently to text than they do to music. And yeah, I just found that really fascinating. So much of what I thought I would learn from this book was not what I really got out from it, which is getting me onto my overall summary, similar books, some recommendations. Overall, I've learned a lot, and I'm glad I read this. It was a struggle to get through. It took a long time. You will come out feeling like you were part of the time period just through the details of it, where you go, oh, okay, there was this company, and there was this company. And even if you didn't live it yourself, and even if you'd never heard of Scribe-D or Wattpad or any of these, never really heard of Kindle Direct Publishing before, you go through and you're like, oh yeah, I can kind of remember that. And there were some things that I could kind of remember. I got my first Kindle in 2011, 2012, something like that. So I do remember the experience of using that. I do remember some of the experiences that he was talking about in this book. It really helped me understand what technology can change, and also drawing parallels between different industries, how predictions actually aren't that great. And people are different, dynamics can flow, and things can just change rapidly. I honestly would say that the book should probably be called Book Skirmishes, because the wars that happen in this book between publishers, between Google, and what happened with Amazon and things like that, they were small. There were some lawsuits and things like that, but overall, I would just say, the book industry just changed. I wouldn't say it was necessarily fraught with absolute chaos and, changes to, certainly no death or murder or things like that, but not even like that much hardship. And it just opened up a lot of opportunities for things that weren't there before. Sure, some things changed, but things always change. The average publisher more probably changed in just their individual life than what was actually happening with the industry as a whole around them. So my pleasure alternated between boredom and extreme interest. So it's really hard to kind of give a rating for this. Personally, I would give it maybe like a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 for myself, just because I learned a lot, and I've got a lot that I can take through to my other podcast, The Value for Value. For the average reader at home, I would say this book is just too long. Like your interest is probably not going to be as niche as mine is. So I'm just going to give a rating for those at home and just say 6 out of 10 for Book Wars by John B. Thompson. It's decent. You really got to make sure you want to know about all the different things of book publishing, because it will give you all of that. It's a huge, huge book. The only thing that I really took away from this in terms of similar books, recommendations, it's funny because I'd say to add to this, to know more about the book publishing, I don't think I really need more than this book. It is so comprehensive. That's the kind of comprehensive and exhaustive. Those are the two words that I took out from this. And I would say the only thing that I could add to this is maybe like a memoir from someone who was an author during this time period, or a publisher who gave firsthand funny experiences of what was happening in the industry. In terms of what it reminds me of, there was another book called The Noonday Demon, which I've read before, by Andrew Solomon. And that's all about depression. And it is similar to this. Thick, I think that was like 600, 700 pages or something. Exhaustive in terms of the medical side of things, the psychological side of things, the history side of things. That book obviously is different in terms of content, but the way it's written, the style and how deep it goes, reminds me of that. So if you like this style of being very comprehensive and exhaustive, that's maybe one that you'd want to try out. Obviously, in terms of things that are similar, Free by Chris Anderson, The Future of Radical Price, or any of those kind of like technological books that I've been reading lately, The Long Tail, The Inevitable, I mentioned that before. Those are probably what you want to get to if you're looking for something that's similar in terms of the actual content and how things have changed digitally. So, big session today. Thank you everyone for joining me. I'm going to jump on into my little Boostagram Lounge here. And I've still got my little sad puppy photo up here, but I did actually get a Boostagram this week. And so I do need to thank Brian D. O'Leary, who just said thank you. And he sent 100 sats sent using Fountain. So this is something that you can do on your app, in particular a podcasting app, which allows you to do this. And Brian is I think he's a podcaster himself. I went to his Fountain page and I couldn't actually see what his podcasts were. I might reach out to him about that. So it's been a bit low on the Boostagram. So I really do encourage you to help support the show via doing that. You can do it via PayPal as well. There's a link down bottom, but I really do appreciate the boost coming in because that helps contribute directly to Cole as well, who was reading out all those fantastic quotes for me and does a fantastic job of that. So I would love for him to be compensated as well. All of this does require a lot of time, energy, things like that. And so, it's very much appreciated if you send in a Boostagram. And so once again, if you go to meremortalspodcast.com/support, I've got some tutorials, guides, links there on how you can do that. I do want to shout out a couple of people who was leaving some comments as well, particularly on the YouTube channel. And I've gotten some recommendations from here and recently. So Inventing Reality, The Politics of a New Media, Rob V sent that in, and he was talking about a similar book to the mass media propaganda one that I was talking about of Noam Chomsky recently. I got another one by Patrick Susskind's Das Parfum, which is a German book, but obviously would be in English. And he was just, I don't think that's related to mass media, but he just wanted to say that. And then we had some just really nice people commenting in regarding about political books, about one of my old one, Gold's Book of Fish by Richard Flanagan. That's a fun one to check out. And Daniel Coates, Donald Butcher, Home of the Yarra, and Nathan Litteroy. Lots of people commenting in, and I really do appreciate that as well. So not only can you help support the show by sending in a Boostagram, but writing a comment as well is really fantastic. Obviously liking, subscribing, all that. So yeah, value for value. I would just ask that you contribute back to the show in some sort of way. I really hate the experience of just talking into a camera, just talking into a microphone, and it feeling like it's just me talking into the void. So some sort of interaction back. Obviously, I've talked about the Boostagrams, but you can do many things to help support the show. Sharing this with a friend who you think would enjoy the channel or enjoy a particular aspect of what I've said, what I've put out. I would love to know some of your suggestions, recommendations for books that you think I would enjoy. So sending those in via a comment or reaching out via social media, any of those sorts of things, really, really do appreciate. You could create a clip from this, which you can do obviously on the podcasting apps like Fountain, where you can also be rewarded from that, but also in places like YouTube, you can clip things. So I would very much appreciate that. And then finally, what do you think I could do to improve this? Are the quotes that I'm getting Cole to read, are they too long? Are they too short? Do you want more of them? Do you want some more visual elements? How can I improve the audio, make this shorter, longer? All these sorts of things I would love to really know and get your feedback on that. So just providing some sort of feedback would be very, very much appreciated. That is it for today, for this week. Thank you very much for joining me all the way to the end. What is coming up? Well, I needed a really light one after reading a couple of heavy ones. So I've got The Moon is Down by John Steinbeck. I've also got The Innocents Abroad by Mark Twain and The Winter of Our Discontent, also by Steinbeck. Those are probably what I'll be getting through over the next couple of weeks. And then there'll be always more. There's always more coming out because I really do enjoy reading books. It's very, very pleasurable for me. So we're going to leave it there for today. Thank you everyone for joining in, for tuning in. Until the next week, I'll be live again. So tune in, as I mentioned, 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on a Thursday. And ciao for now. Karen out. Peace.